All right, let's talk about a book with a title that, well, it doesn't pull any punches. We're diving into Mark Manson's Everything is Fucked, which starts off bleak and ends up somewhere totally different. Let's do this.
So right away, the book just throws this idea at you. Manson calls it the uncomfortable truth. And it's basically this. In the grand scheme of things, you're going to die, and most of what you do won't really matter. Yeah, I know. Super uplifting stuff, right? But hang in there, because this is actually the foundation for everything else.
And this leads us to this massive contradiction, something that really defines our modern world. I mean, look around. Objectively, things have never been better. We've got more wealth, we're safer, we live longer than anyone ever. So why does it feel so bad? Why are we seeing this explosion of anxiety, depression, and just this feeling that something's deeply wrong?
Exactly. Why? If all the data says we're winning, why do we feel like we're losing? The book argues that we're looking for the answer in all the wrong places. It's not about the economy or politics or social media. Not really. The problem is inside us. Which brings us to this amazing metaphor. Get this. Your mind is a clown car. You know, it looks small on the outside, but it's just packed with chaos, it's totally unpredictable, and there are way, way more drivers in there than you'd ever imagine. And here's the kicker, and it's a little unsettling. The big secret is, you're not actually in charge. Nope. That whole feeling of self-control, of you making rational decisions, the book says it's mostly an illusion. It's a story your brain tells you after the decision has already been made.
So let's break down this whole clown car idea. Imagine you have two brains, right? First, there's your feeling brain. This one is pure emotion, impulse, and it's the one with its hands firmly on the steering wheel. It's driving. Then you've got the thinking brain. It's sitting in the passenger seat, holding the map, shouting suggestions, and basically just trying to figure out where the heck you're going.
So just to make it super clear, the feeling brain is all about action. It wants what it wants, and it wants it now. It's a heat-seeking missile for pleasure and a master of avoiding pain. The thinking brain, on the other hand, is the narrator. It comes up with stories to explain why the feeling brain just swerved across 3 lanes of traffic. It can suggest a better route for sure, but it absolutely cannot grab the wheel. It can only try to bargain.
Okay, so if the emotional brain is in charge, where do our values come from? You know, the things we care about most. Well, they don't come from some logical spreadsheet in our thinking brain. Nope, they come from pain. Every single one of your values, according to Manson, is basically your feeling brain's attempt to fix a past hurt. It's an emotional reaction, trying to make things right.
And this is where the thinking brain really shines. It takes all of these messy emotions, these drives, these reactions to pain, and it spins them into a neat little story. And that story is you. It's your identity. And this narrative becomes so important, so central to who you are, that you'll protect it with the same ferocity you'd use to protect your own life. All right, so if we're all just being driven around by our feelings in this crazy clown car, what do we do? How do we fix it? Well, the obvious answer for most people is hope. We just need to have hope for a better future, right? But this is exactly where the book throws a curveball. It's what's called the hope trap. See, hope is basically the feeling brain's favorite trick. When you really think about it, hope is a deal. It's a transaction. It's like, okay, I will put up with all this pain right now, this awful workout, this soul-crushing job, because I'm promised something better later. It's the engine behind everything from wanting a raise to wanting to save the world. And don't get me wrong, hope can be incredibly powerful. It's a kind of glue. It brings us together. We find other people who want the same better future that we do, and we build communities. Manson calls these our religions, and he doesn't just mean spiritual ones. It could be your political party, your favorite cause, or even just your group of friends who all believe the same things. But, and this is a huge but, here comes the trap. In order to have an us, a group united by a shared hope, you absolutely have to have a them. You need an enemy. You need someone to blame, someone who's standing in the way of your beautiful future. And just like that, hope, the thing that was supposed to bring us salvation, becomes the very source of our conflict and our division.
And this really gets to the heart of it. Hope isn't some free-floating good thing. It actually needs something to be broken. It can't exist unless you're convinced that right now is terrible and unacceptable. Hope literally feeds on the gap between our flawed present and some imaginary perfect future. It creates a perpetual crisis that it then promises to solve.
And this leads us to the book's most shocking argument. The reason everything feels so messed up isn't because we've run out of hope. It's because we're drowning in it. We are addicted to hope. It's not the cure for our problems. Hope is the problem. Okay, whoa. So, if hope is the problem, then what? What are we supposed to do? This is where things start to shift. We're moving into the part of the book that's all about finding a new way to live, one that isn't constantly banking on a better tomorrow. The alternative is actually an old idea, borrowed from the philosopher Nietzsche. He called it amor fati, which means a love of one's fate. Instead of wishing things were different, the goal is to fully embrace everything, the good, the bad, the painful, the joyful, all of it. It's about accepting your life as it is, right now, and finding meaning right here, not in some far-off future.
So how do you navigate the world if hope isn't your compass? Well, there's another philosopher, Immanuel Kant, who gave us a pretty solid rule to live by. He called it the formula of humanity. And it's simple. Treat every person, yourself included, as an end in themselves, and never ever just as a tool to get something else. Don't use people to build your perfect future. Value them right here, right now, for who they are.
So really, the whole mission described in the book is about growing up. See, when we're kids, we're all about pleasure. When we're adolescents, we learn to make deals. I'll do this if I get that. That's basically what hope is, a transaction. But to become a true adult is to move beyond that. It's about acting on principles, unconditional values, without needing to be guaranteed a specific reward.
So here's the bottom line. The path to a better life, and maybe even a better world, isn't paved with dreams of some perfect, pain-free future. It's built brick by brick with principled actions you take today. It's about embracing the struggle, accepting the pain as part of the deal, instead of constantly trying to escape it.
And that really is the big question to walk away with. If you were to give up on hope, not on being happy, but on hope as this transactional deal for a better future, what would you have left? If your path isn't paved with hope, what are you going to build it with?